That was Lips Like Poison by Baranovich. And I switched my camera on before I intended to. I started the stream. Didn't intend to put my camera on. Thought it was going to be on the Be Right Back screen. But it wasn't. Hi, hello, welcome to MKR, MotherKat Reads stream this evening. And oh, hi, Avianda, one of our superstars this evening. Thank you for joining the chat. We are being thoroughly spoiled by just lots of hope this evening. We've got some beautiful stories. We will be having some of Star Wars Episode 9, an adult rework by Avianda, which I'm personally very much looking forward to reading for you. We have I'll Be the Light and Lead You Home by Vedavan, which is just gorgeous. Hi, Green Umbrella. I can't believe you managed to make it. I know you said this is harder for you. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We're going to have The Mark by I Ship Star Wars, which is a sweet, hot little story that is... Well, I really hope you're going to enjoy it, because I certainly did. Both in practice earlier and the first time I read it, which was a while back. Gorgeous little story. So, I'm not going to do This Week in Raylo, because This Week in Fandom, because it's hard. It's a hard week in fandom. And lots of pain and repercussions. So I think we're just going to stick to Mountains of Hope. And I will warn you now, I will not be going over time, because it looks like it's going to snow, and I promised the kids if it snows tomorrow we're going sledging. Things I'm going to regret. Do we own a sledge? No, we do not. What we own is a baking tray and a bin bag, but apparently we can do this. I found a thing on YouTube. Speaking of things on YouTube, if anybody follows Shalaleah on Instagram, Shalaleah now has a YouTube channel, where he does boyfriend experience EDMR chat thingies, and they're lovely. So if you want a beautifully voiced sweet young man to say lovely things to you, go and check out Shalaleah's YouTube channel, because it's amazing. Other things on YouTube are there is a digital musical artist on YouTube that is one of our Raylo fam, and I'll put a link up to some of that later. I'm hoping we can do something collaborative, because it's absolutely lovely. But I'll put a link up to that a bit later, so you don't get distracted. So we're going to start this evening off with Avianda's Star Wars Episode 9, an adult rework. We're gonna read chapter 12. I do heartily recommend that everybody goes in and reads the rest of it, because as Fixit Fit goes, this is one of my favourites. There's a lot of smut, but there's a lot of real character work. It's beautifully earnest, and it's wonderfully hopeful. So a really great place for us to first foot this evening. As he gathered his things, there was a signal at the door. It was Hux. The General had an aide bring a good-sized box. "These are the documents we found, Supreme Leader," Hux said. "Wouldn't it be easier just to study in the library, or get a team to filter through all this for you?" Kylo looked at Hux. By an odd twist of circumstance, they were like brothers to one another. Jealousy, competition and all. Snoke had enjoyed playing them off on one another, but they'd had to rely on each other a few times as well. Today, Hux seemed content with him. To Hux, Kylo was finally assuming his responsibilities, even if he had radical ideas about hierarchy in the ranks. "There's too much noise in the library. In my quarters, there are less distractions. I've got a hunch of what I'm looking for." He dismissed the general's suggestion. "Fewer distractions," Hux corrected, ever the stickler for rules and regulations. "What are you looking for, sir?" Do I trust him or do I kill him? Kylo wondered. At least he stopped trying to have me killed. His mien had changed. Hux swallowed and took a step back. There are hints at where I could find more Jedi texts, he finally said, deciding to take the gamble and allow his brother to live for now. There is another, more ancient presence in the Force. I would better understand what it is before deciding how to use it. An ancient presence in the Force, sir? Hux inquired, sounding fascinated. Hi, Dampier, welcome. Snoke's infrequent but very public punishments of Hux, as well as his own altercations since Snoke's death, had given the man a better taste of the power of the Force. Ben knew the man's fear of chaos made him understand the Force as something that tied the universe together in an orderly manner. Then the fallen Jedi had a sudden flash of understanding. The Force had little to do with order. Neither the light nor dark resolved themselves in an ultimate way to organise the universe. In fact, one side's order was the other side's chaos. The First Order's mission was to bring peace to a chaotic galaxy, not so different from the abnegation of the light side demanded. Sir, Hux prompted him. Hux, what is the mission of the First Order? Kylo asked, curious to hear the man's private view, isolated from all the propaganda and pageantry he so often relied on before others. To bring order to the galaxy, sir. When the Empire fell, there was horrible chaos for years before brave and organised people picked up the pieces and made sense of the galaxy at last. The General responded, unsure what was behind this sudden interest. Hux had terrible memories of those days. His family had lost everything. When the First Order had picked him up, he'd worked tirelessly to get to this position. And by then, however, he'd become an orphan. And what will happen once we've conquered all and imposed our order everywhere? Kylo nudged. Well, peace, I suppose, Hux said, perplexed. Do you believe that, Hux? Peace with no resistance anywhere? What is the first line of the Code of the Sith? He posed, daring to challenge the man in the dogma he espoused. I'm not sure. Something about passion? Peace is a lie. There is only passion. The Sith thrive on chaos, Hux. What is the first line of the Code of the Jedi? Kylo pushed further. What? Sir, I don't understand you. Hux broke off, struggling with the line of the questioning. There is no emotion. There is peace. Which one is closer to our goal, Hux? What do we want? Hux was close to panic and could only stutter. We want peace, Hux. That's what I'm studying. War is chaos, and there will always be resistance to our order, because we try to impose peace through war. Somewhere between the Sith and the Jedi, between chaos and order, there is a way. I will find it. I will determine a way to move forward. Kylo knew his rival as well as Hux knew him. He knew the man's love of aesthetic beauty was repressed by his fear of loss, that he appreciated flawed and fragile things, collecting them in secret. I will forge a way for you, and your bright red hair, and your collection of potteries of all cultures and colours, to have a place in the order, you and other people of other colours. Hux was stunned chaos, violent, endless chaos, with what they'd wrought the galaxy under Snoke. He remembered the destruction of the Hosnian system. It had been a terrible day. Their show of force had only disorganised the galaxy further. Peace was the end goal of the First Order, but it ran against the philosophy of the Sith. The Jedi were closer philosophy, but they had failed too, denying the truest expression of nature in life, emotion. Kylo resumed his explanation. This ancient being is a Sith Master. The last Sith Master. It shared visions with me. Its ultimate goal is darkness, meaning to put out all light. I don't mean metaphorically, Hux. I mean snuffing out all the stars. The scar-faced dark man took a new breath before facing his closest general. Think about this before you betray me. You and I go way back. Now I will leave you again, I think, for a longer time than usual. Keep the ship running tight until I return. Sir? All blood had drained from Armitage Hux's face, making it even paler, if that were possible. He paused, bowed thorough in thought. Kylo, he said, I will think on this. Kylo took his command shuttle this time. He could stash more supplies on it, and a crew of 5 fit in it comfortably. It had a tiny galley with amenities. He could even sleep in it comfortably with a retractable berth instead of just reclining in the pilot seat. It wasn't as agile as the Silencer, but it was smaller than the Falcon. He told his subordinates he was going to Octo. There was no harm in them knowing now. Rey had communicated the coordinates to him. When he landed on the Temple Island, the dark side had thought of his Uncle Luke. He saw the little huts Rey had slept in during her short stay with the old Jedi Master. There were a few blankets left in one of them. Rey's? He picked one up and brought it near its face. It had an old man's smell, and he had a flash of his uncle, bitter and defeated, full of feelings of guilt and failure. The Jewel crate had been a diversion, but it had also been a message. I failed you, Ben, his old Jedi Master had admitted. In truth, they had failed each other. He finally found the hut where Rey had stayed, but nothing remained of her inside the blasted ruin. The caretakers were rebuilding it, as it had been blown apart by Luke's fear. He remembered their first encounters through the Force, how things between them had changed since then. She had grown stronger and stronger with every exchange. And me? He thought he'd grown weaker. That's what Snoke had told him, but Snoke had lied to him. He'd lied about forging the bond. He'd been unpleasantly surprised by their union in that doomed throne room. Fighting alongside Rey had made Ben stronger in the Force, even if he had kept to the dark side's way of using it. What was that connection, he wondered, and where did it come from? He had not found much information about it through his studies just yet. He walked up to the pinnacle and found the beautiful mosaic inlaid in the cavern at the top, illuminated by the twin suns through the opening where the meditation stone was. The mosaic was equal parts light and dark, he saw with fascination. That's the Prime Jedi. I saw it every day for 5 years and never realized the meaning of it until Rey came here for hope. It was Luke, standing before him pale, bathed in ethereal light. Ben felt he could let the light in him breathe again. Uncle, Master, he started. Don't call me that, the old man chided gently. I taught you how to fight and how to move things around and trick stupid people. I didn't teach you a damn thing about hope when it was what you needed the most. Ben shook his head. Uncle, I'm sorry about the training temple. I didn't mean to... The ghost raised his hand to stop him. You didn't. In fact, now I've become one with the Force, as they say. I've learned a few things. Sorry to pop your bottle, kid. You weren't strong enough back then to blow the whole thing up yourself. Luke told him with a hint of humour before he sobered, meeting his nephew's gaze intently. That was a Sith intervention. Snoke played us all like violins. It was a good move, by the way, tricking him like that with a saber. Genius. I can imagine the look on his face. Oh, it was priceless, Ben Solo confirmed, letting out a small laugh that surprised even him, and his face grew sombre as he replayed the whole scene in his mind. She didn't take my hand, he said, trying to articulate the rage he'd wielded so recklessly that day. I felt so betrayed. I was so angry. I was so desperate. She's a strong one, that Rey. Dangerous, Luke nodded, then quirked a whimsical eyebrow at Ben. Did you know she almost killed me? Come to think of it, she asked for my help, and I refused her. A reflective pause fell between them as both men contemplated how they treated the scavenger. There's a cave below. She must have told you about it, his uncle commented, eyeing him speculatively. Maybe you should go see for yourself. Uncle, what are you asking? Ben demanded, astounded by Luke's suggestion given all that had passed between them. Haven't I learned enough from the dark side? Not alone. She's here. And the old Jedi Master was gone. The sacred tree had burned to ashes, leaving a hole like a crater. The last Jedi was standing in front of the blackened stump, small and pale and straight as a sapling, her hair bound in that triple-brand style she preferred. Ben's heart leapt in his chest at the sight of her. It was all he could do not to run and embrace her. When he reached her, they stood side by side, looking at the ruin in silence. Good thing I stole the books, she finally spoke. You stole them? He exclaimed, turning to stare at her, then feeling the corner of his mouth lift upward a little in amusement. Of course, the scavenger would scavenge. I told myself I was borrowing them, but I'm not giving them back, Ray explained, clearly feeling justified. Besides, they would have been destroyed if I'd left them here, obviously. She turned to him. How was your trip? You know most of it. It went surprisingly well. Ben looked down for a moment before raising his eyes to her hazel gaze steadily. I only killed 3 people, and I managed to blockade my officers well enough. They don't seem to be hunting me down. Yet. I met some people, or maybe I should say I saw them for the first time. He paused a moment before continuing. I brought some more texts with me and some of Snoke's personal notes that were salvaged from the Supremacy. Oh, and I read the content of the artifact I brought with me. You did? What was it? Ray asked, perking up in excitement. You won't believe this, he told her, feeling his spirits rise at the simple joy of sharing this with her. It's a love letter from my grandfather to my grandmother. Really? She laughed. He flared up. What? There was a lot of emotion in that letter. It was very moving. He flushed as he defended the sentiments shared between his grandparents. Oh, Maker, I'm sorry, Ray apologized quickly. I didn't know. I can't imagine the evil Sith Lord writing love letters. Well, he did. Kylo Ren grumped, then stomped away back to his command ship. Ray watched him go, following his receding form thoughtfully. Ben Solo's only part of him, she thought to herself. The Ren will always be there, protecting him like armour. She liked him that way, like the fire that was always just below the surface, like banked coals. She liked its heat. The crew of the Falcon supped together, laughing and talking loudly. The weather was warm even when the sun set. Ben had finally come over to sit with them, ill at ease and quiet. Poe had found a bottle of some blue liquor, and they passed it around. The fighter pilot started recounting stories from his youth, eventually remembering Ben as a dour boy. Another dour boy, like himself, honestly. He visited them on occasion, when Senator Organa dragged him along during summer breaks. Had Solo's son not already been contaminated, they might have been friends. Ben thought he should remember him. Poe Dameron was of an age with him, after all, but so much of his teens had been taken up with the forces struggling to gain control in him. He could barely remember any of it, except a desire for death to take him. Then he clearly remembered, one clear afternoon, when they visited the Damerons, the boys had hidden in the cockpit of Poe's mother, Shara Bay's ship, shared a spice stick. The boys had talked about their hopes to become the best pilots of the galaxy. They'd both become a little disillusioned with the Republic even then. Poe would later join the Resistance. Ben would become Kylo Ren. You resisted better than most. I was impressed. Ben suddenly told Poe. It took a moment for Dameron to catch that the remark referred to the mind probe he'd endured under Kylo Ren's interrogation. It was meant as a compliment, maybe an apology. Yeah, well, I tried. Thanks. The captain shrugged it off uncomfortably. The encounter had left him with an hours-long migraine, proportionate to his wounded pride. Fen and Ben told a few tales of life within the First Order's galactic navy, their contrasting points of view fascinating to the rest of the crew and revealing to each other. The tension between them was diffusing into a better understanding. Ben certainly seemed to gain much from the exchange. I'm lucky you survived our fight, he finally told the stormtrooper. Another indirect apology. Rose and Ray were getting a little tipsy on Poe's pilfered liquor. The short mechanic working up the courage to make her intentions clear to Finn. They were all a little drunk by the end of the evening. Hearing the dreamy-eyed couple recount their trip to Canto Blight and the flight of the Fathiers made everyone laugh. There were moments of malaise as well. It was true that many industries stood to lose much if the war ended. Ray decided to talk about her own experience of that day. Snoke's demise. She told of how Ben and her had worked together to defeat the Praetorian Guards after he had tricked his old master. Things had soured after that, but for a few minutes their energies had synced and fed off of each other in perfect balance, and when she looked over at Ben, it was clear to everyone that the young woman considered that the most important part of that fateful day. Finn broke the tension, laughing as he imagined the surprise on the old monster's face. He almost reached out to slap his old boss's shoulder, thought better of it and slapped Ray's instead. Even Chewie was beginning to relax, but he mostly listened to the others' stories, not ready to reminisce about the past so much. He did tell the tale of the Kessel Run to everyone's delight. That was far enough in the past to be safe to talk about. When Ben stood up to go to his shuttle, everyone wished him good night. He surprised himself by responding in kind. Ray offered to accompany him to get the texts, she explained. Going up the gangplank, he was thankful she had no memory of the last time she'd been on the shuttle. He let her in to the storage. The box was bigger than she was willing to carry, so she decided she'd bring them tomorrow instead. Then she stood near the entranceway, hesitant, not quite willing to leave just yet. Ben had already removed his cloak and boots when he realised she was waiting. He turned to take her in, that tough beauty that glowed with an inner radiance that entranced him. He walked over to her, then he leaned down and kissed her. Oh, isn't it lovely? So, yes, expect swooping narratives, expect some fantastic fights, and yeah, treat yourself to 27 chapters of just gorgeousness in Star Wars Episode 9, an adult rework by Aviander69. So our next fic is short and sweet. I know that Vedavan followed me. I don't know if I Ship Star Wars is one of the new people that followed me today, or if they're here. But if you are, thank you so much for letting me read your work. Oh, hello Vedavan, thank you. Welcome to the chat. Thank you. I'm actually in recovery. I've been quite poorly, which is why I'm having fun and getting to read some amazing fic. So thank you so much. I'm really glad that you enjoyed it. I'm going to do the mark, and then we're going to close off with quite a lot of I'm going to try actually to do all 5 chapters of your I'll Be the Light and Lead You Home, but I might need to stop halfway through for a cup of tea. But yeah, thank you very much for joining, and thank you very much for following as well. Really appreciate follow. As I've mentioned in a few places, but this isn't an affiliate stream. I'm not earning money from this. So, I mean, anybody who wants to go click on my Ko-fi link, go for it. But yeah, this isn't a subsidised stream. I'm not making money off of your work. That's not what I'm doing here. What I'm doing is rehabbing my voice after a bout of what is called bronchial pneumonia, which was awful. Don't get it. It's nasty. If you have a cough and it lasts more than a week, or if you've had a cough for more than a week and it gets worse, go and get it checked out. Trust me on this one. So, yes, we have The Mark by I Ship Star Wars. Tags for this, because we're going to read the whole thing, is Domestic Raylo, Star Wars, The Rise of Skywalker, Fixit, Devoted Rey, Ben Solo, Kylo Ren, Fluff, Smut, Biting, Masturbation, Voyeurism, I Love These Two Crazy Kids, Star Wars Canonverse, Freeform, Force Bond, Oral Sex, No Angst, Fixit of Sorts. Always. Thank you, Vedvan. This is Twinings tea. Sorry, there we go. This is The Mark by I Ship Star Wars. I'm going to share the screen just for a second, just so you can see the art for this, because it's just so pretty. It's just nice. It's just the way that it's been framed. It's really, really lovely. And no, stop doing it now. I can't get it to stop now. You're just going to have to... so it should now be sharing... is it not sharing the... it tells me that it's sharing it. Try this. Can you see that? Boo. Okay. Yeah, just click the link and go and have a look. There's just it's got a really nice little wallpaper graphic. Sorry guys. Follow more technically literate streamers. And I'll just stick to telling you your own stories back. Ray feels his presence as soon as his ship enters the planet's atmosphere. She stumbles out of the fresh air, slim frame wrapped in a towel. She peers back the curtains of her bedroom window, just enough to get a glimpse of the cloudless blue sky. Soon enough, a familiar grey shape appears on the horizon, heading straight for her. Criff! She breathes against the window pane. Ray hurries to address her, throwing on the first set of clothes she can find, her hair still wet from the shower. But she doesn't have time to brush or style it, so she hastily combs her fingers through it on the way out of the bedroom. She tugs on her boots, then bursts out of the front door into the sunlight. A short distance from the cottage to the landing pad, she's a walking bundle of nerves, both excited to see him and caught off guard, because she didn't expect him to return until tomorrow. He's been away for a week, and the days here have been very lonely without him, not to mention the nights. By the time Ray nears the landing pad, his ship has already touched down. A lone figure emerges from the cockpit, and her heart leaps in her chest at the sight of him. Ben's dressed in typical spacer gear, looking every bit his father's son, in black pants, a white shirt and a dark grey vest. It's a very good look on him. He greets her with a warm smile as his boots hit the ground and she melts a little inside. Even now, 3 months after Exegol, she's still getting used to seeing him smile like that. Ray rushes forward to meet him, and they collide together at the edge of the landing pad. "Welcome back," she greets, nuzzling her face against his chest. "You're early." "I assumed you wouldn't mind." His hands drift through her damp hair before settling on her shoulders. "Your hair looks different." Ray pokes him playfully in the ribs. "I just got out of the shower. You should have called me to let me know you're on your way." "I know, but that would have ruined the surprise." They make their way back to the cottage, holding hands with their fingers entwined. Ben gives her a summary of his trip. He met up with Lando, helped him negotiate a business deal with some outer rim merchants. There were a few heated arguments, but fortunately no brawls. In the end, all parties involved came to an agreement that was mutually beneficial. Ray doesn't have much to report on her end, aside from the infestation of field rats she'd had to banish from their garden. Life in their new home is relatively quiet and uneventful, and that's all they'd wanted after the grief and chaos of the war. They still check in regularly with the Resistance, making sure there's no major trouble that requires their help, but aside from that, she and Ben are left alone. Ben closes the front door as soon as they're inside, then swoops down to kiss her. She hums with approval and practically melts in his arms. Her hands come up to cradle his face. It's something she's done so often in the last 3 months that she doesn't think twice about it. That proves to be a huge mistake. They break apart for a moment, foreheads touching in the morning light that filters through the windows behind them. His eyes shift from her face to her left hand, eyebrows arching in curiosity at what he finds there. What's this? He takes her hand in his, gently rotating it to look at the red mark that circles her wrist. Damn it. Ray chews her lower lip, cursing herself for being so careless. But then, how was she to know he'd show up a full day early? Her first instinct is to shrug it off. It's nothing, really, Ray. The tone of Ben's voice drops a little lower, curiosity turning to concern. On close inspection, he can see the mark is actually 2 jagged, crescent-shaped indentations. Is that a bite mark? She swallows a gulp of air, her mouth suddenly going dry. His fierce brown eyes bore into hers, searching for an explanation. The more time she takes to answer, the more suspicious he gets. Ray can't lie to him, even if she wanted to. The bond they share through the Force would betray her in a heartbeat. The only option is to be honest, no matter how embarrassing the truth may be. Yes, she finally replies, her cheeks flushing pink with the confession, and before Ben's suspicion can turn into anything worse, she adds, It's from me. I bit myself. He cocks his head a little, confused, not satisfied with her answer. Why would you bite yourself? I was in the shower and I started thinking about how I missed you, and well... She trails off with a frustrated sigh. It's hard to explain with words. It would be easier to just show him. So she closes her eyes and reaches out to him through their bond, sending him her memories from earlier this morning. Ray stands in the shower, hot water cascading down her back. She leans forward, her forearm braced against the wall to support her weight. Her free hand is between her thighs, fingers gliding back and forth in a deliciously slow rhythm. Her breath comes in shallow gasps, swirling the steamy air around her. She imagines Ben is holding her from behind, imagines it's his fingers slipping inside her as he whispers filthy things in her ear. Her mouth drops open with a moan, eyelids fluttering as she surrenders to her fantasy. She quickens her pace, her cries get louder, and suddenly she pitches forward, her mouth latching onto the first thing it finds, her wrist. She bites down as a hoarse cry tears loose from her throat. The waves of her orgasm crash over her, leaving her body weak and trembling against the shower wall. Ray opens her eyes and the memory fades away. Deep down she knows she shouldn't feel ashamed about what she did. She's a grown woman after all. She has every right to take care of her body's needs. This was a very intimate act. And despite her relationship with Ben growing more physical over the last few months, he's never seen her do that before. Ben gazes down at her, eyes wide in disbelief. The tips of his ears turn red. His mouth gapes open a little, but no words come out. For a few moments he just stares at her, dumbstruck, looking like she just kind of slapped him across the face. Something twitches under his eye, and he flashes her a grin. It's the kind of lopsided grin that always catches her off guard, the one she finds both infuriating and adorable, depending on the circumstance. His grip on her wrist loosens, and his thumb gently caresses the self-inflicted wound. And to think, he murmurs with a mischievous glint in his eyes, I missed all that by a few minutes. Well, she retorts, if you hadn't left me alone for a week, I wouldn't have... The rest of her reply dies in her throat as Ben's mouth crashes into hers. She's surrounded by the heat of his body, lost in the scent of his skin and the taste of his tongue. It's so intoxicating that her knees buckle beneath her, threatening to collapse. Ray wraps her arms around his neck, clinging to him desperately and deepening the kiss. She remembers how hard it was to sleep without his strong arms around her, but now he's back, and now she has him all to herself again. He lifts her off the floor, hoisting her like she weighs nothing. Her legs wrap around his waist without hesitation. Stars, how she'd missed this. The heat, the friction, the way the force seems to pulse in the air around them when they're together like this. I'm never leaving you alone again, he promises, hands cupping her ass as he carries her to the bedroom. The next few minutes are a blur of heated kisses, panting breaths and fumbling hands. Clothes are hastily removed and discarded on the bedroom floor. Soon Ray is lying naked on the bed with Ben's large frame living over her. Hands gripping her knees as he gently spreads her legs apart, exposing her entrance that's already wet and waiting for him. He leans down to press kisses on the inside of her thigh, and her body trembles with anticipation, but then his teeth graze her skin, and he bites down, sucking at her tender flesh. She lets out a gasp, revelling in the new combination of pleasure and pain. Another mark to add to my collection, she muses with a dark satisfaction that surprises her. Of course, Ben hears her thoughts. She's so keyed up with lust that her mind is as wide open as her legs. He answers her with a wolfish grin as his biting kisses move further down her thigh. Show me, he growls against her skin. Show me what you did to yourself earlier, when you were thinking of me. The words are both a plea and a command. He glances up at her, eyes blown wide with possessive desire, his features taut with tension, as if her refusal would ruin him. Ray lets out a shaky breath, her cheeks warming at the idea of a repeat performance. But because it's Ben, because she's missed him so, and because he's looking at her like that, of course she can't say no. Biting her lower lip, she slides her hand down to the space between them. Her fingers glide back and forth along the wet folds of her sex, sending familiar sparks of pleasure through her body. When she dips one finger inside, pushing it as deep as she can and then drawing it out again, her breath hitches as she continues at a steady pace, slowly stoking the fire that's burning inside her. Ben watches her mesmerised, drunk on the sight of her pleasuring herself. He's bent at just the right angle that Ray can see his cock twitching between his legs, a bead of clear fluid dripping from its tip. Stars. Ray, you look so hot when you do that. His words set a thrill through her system, the deep rumble of his voice giving her goosebumps. Feeling emboldened by his praise, she flashes him a wicked grin and adds another finger to her ministrations. I'm glad you're enjoying the show, but honestly, it doesn't feel half as good as when you're inside me. Oh, how he loves the sound of that. His eyes darken to nearly black as he surges forward with a hungry snarl. One swift motion, he pulls her fingers out and replaces them with his tongue. Ray lets out a startled cry as his mouth seals over her cunt, shamelessly lapping at her like a man dying of thirst. The smouldering flame within her bursts into an inferno, spreading a delicious heat between her thighs. Her fingers tangle in his lush black hair, pulling hard enough to elicit a hoarse groan from him. Then his tongue rolls over her clit, and Ray shudders beneath him with a low whimper. I thought of you too, he confesses, in between long, languid strokes. At night, when I couldn't sleep, I'd picture you like this, all hot and wet for me. Ben! She gasps helplessly, her thighs twitching at either side of his head. She's close, so close that her hips buck against his sinful mouth, and she swears she can feel him smirking at her. He presses harder, faster, building her up so she can't take any more. Ray's back arches as her orgasm tears through her. Stars explode behind her eyelids, and her mouth drops open with a strangled cry. Every muscle in her core tenses for a few glorious seconds, and then relaxes in the delicious haze of afterglow. Ben rises from his crouched position, leaning down to press his mouth against hers. She lets out a little gratified moan as her arms wrap around his shoulders, drawing him down to her. And you. Ray pants in between heavy, hungry kisses. Look so hot when you lick me like that. He grunts in agreement. I've been dreaming about doing that all week. Their kissing halts when a shrill beeping noise erupts from somewhere across the room. It's Ray's comlink, which sits on the dresser next to her lightsaber. Her eyes dart nervously to the dresser, then back to Ben. That'll be Finn and Rose, she explains sheepishly. He nods in understanding, but doesn't move to get off of her. Instead, he dips his head down to trail fervent kisses along the column of her throat. You can call them back, he murmurs huskily in her ear. I'm not done showing you how much I missed you. The tip of his erection nudges between her thighs, and suddenly her nerves are on fire again. Ray's breath comes out in a hiss, her hips already tilting to provide a better angle for him. Okay, she agrees. I'll call back later. Much later. He chuckles at that, then slowly sinks into her, and they lose themselves in soft sheets and the glow of early morning light. I did say it was sweet and hot, but I should have taken my jumper off. It's too wet. Oh my goodness. I hope that this one gets uploaded, because we have to tell everybody how hot that was. Gosh. Oh. So has everybody had a good week? Is everybody ready for the run up? I'm not ready. Oh my goodness. That was... Damn. I spent all night wrapping presents thinking that there were not nearly enough presents. But then I realised that I'd spent all night wrapping presents. So it must be enough presents. I remember when my kids were little and their presents they just seemed like endless presents, giant things, and they were like big toys. And now they're like, can we have Robux? How do you gift wrap Robux? Probably don't want Robux. My grown one just wanted cash. Smartest Dan Pierce says I brought my husband a t-shirt, and that's the extent of my shopping and prep. Awesome. That sounds pretty good to me right now, I'll be honest. He got everyone else's gifts and he's going to be out of town. Okay. Dan Pierce, is your festive period going to involve you laying on the couch eating chocolate and reading all the fanfic? Nice. Living the dream. Oh, yes, please. That'll be your Christmas present to all of us. Has everybody seen Dan Pierce's new chapter today? Give me a second. Embarrass you. Go and have a look at what Dan Pierce's been up to. It's full of fun. You know, when you open something up and you're like, I want to read this now, but I've got stuff to do. I was like, turned up when I was in the middle of sorting out the stuff in the kitchen. I think you reposted one of my favourite ones of your crossovers today. And it was Cordy in The World Between Worlds, saving Ben. And I was like, technically it's Fixit. I genuinely, and like Dan Peer wrote Our Mrs. Logan, which is like the when it comes to crossover fix, that's Clyde Logan and Ophelia in the Firefly universe. You can't really beat that. Let's just. It used to turn up. The new chapters would turn up like just before I woke up in the morning, so I wouldn't even have a cup of coffee. Just first thing in the morning before I've had coffee, just like, this is some of the worst spelt comments in the history of comments are the comments that I used to leave on Our Mrs. Logan, because I would comment before I had coffee. Ray, Finn and Kylo Ben ending up on the Serenity with the crew. Oh, my comments were hilarious because they were very badly punctuated. See, I was like, because Finn could be an interesting, because he's quite sweet, you could be an interesting love interest for Simon. Then I remembered that you're a range shipper, aren't you? So, I don't want to leave Kaylee spare, so that'd be awful. No, Kaylee doesn't. Kaylee deserves all the best things. Anyway. Run-on sentences are the best sentences. Anybody who's listening to me like talk to myself out loud here can tell why I write the way I write, and I write the way I speak, which is all commas, no full stops. All commas and exclamation. It's lucky I don't talk for a living, right? Finn, Rose Poe, River Jane, Raylo. Oh, you didn't mention Rose and Poe coming across, so I was like, I thought maybe they didn't come, but I thought I'm gonna have to go back. I don't think I've read this one, but yes. Anyway, that's not what I'm doing right now. That's the wrong kind of fix it. Hang on. Oh my goodness. So we have I'll Be the Light and Lead You Home by Vedavan, and this is gorgeous. And I would spoil it, but I get to do, those of you who are regular viewers, well, no, I get to do one of my favourite voices. That's not the main two. So alternate universe, modern setting. Post-canon Fixit multiverse, birthmarks, Force Dyad, Star Wars, soulmates, past lives, love at first sight inspired by Buddhist principles including samsara, the wheel of cyclic existence, karma, freeform, nirvana, freeform, rebirth, reincarnation, fixing the rise of Skywalker. Raise your hand if you've ever been personally victimised by the rise of Skywalker. Star Wars, The Rise of Skywalker, Fixit, post-Star Wars, The Rise of Skywalker, dreams, visions, fluff and angst and feels. This is going to be a strange little journey, but we are going to feel better by the end of it. Catharsis, happy ending. We are all here, Vedavan, with our hands in the air because we all follow that particular tag. Personally victimised by the rise of Skywalker. This is I'll Be the Light and Lead You Home by Vedavan, who we are lucky enough to have with us in the chat. Thank you very much for letting us read your story. All of us. Ray wakes to the earthy smell of petrichor drifting in from the open window. It's been a hot, dry summer with the cool breeze fanning over her bare feet that have kicked out from under the sheets. It's a sure sign that much-needed rain shower has just passed through. Thin, grey dawn creeps in timidly, barely lighting the room, but she can see well enough, and a slow smile spreads on her face at the various items of clothing, some hers, some not hers, littered across the floor. It's the first time she's ever wakened in a bedroom that's not her own, but that's okay. Better than okay, actually. Even though she and Ben only met a week and a half ago, he's already succeeded in turning her world completely upside down in the best possible way. Her smile grows wider as she dips her chin to look at him. He's still sound asleep, holding her tightly in his grasp, his massive frame wrapped around her like a hot, heavy, bend-shaped vine. His arms, strong and solid, crushing her to his bare chest. His cheek pressed against her breast, warm, even breaths puff across her skin, and a soft rush of affection runs through her as she combs her fingers through his dark, tangled waves, her nails scratching lightly against his scalp. The quiet serenity of the moment is enough to make her throat swell, and she blinks back the sudden, inexplicable urge to weep. Before Ben, Ray never thought she'd feel like this about someone. To want them in every way imaginable. It's as if she only began breathing the instant their eyes met. Had only ever known true happiness the first time his lips had brushed hers. And if the previous 10 days were a building crescendo, then last night was its passionate peak. They'd met for dinner, as they had every other night this week, but last night Ben had wanted to cook for her. Ribeye steaks and asparagus on the grill because she'd once mentioned it was her favourite meal. At 29, Ben was solid 8 years older, and on their second date he'd admitted with a flush that while he wasn't a virgin, he had had fewer encounters than he could count on one hand. So when she'd confessed she'd never been with anyone, he seemed determined to take things slow. For her sake, a well-intentioned, if a bit old-fashioned act of chivalry she found sweet, and would never ever tease him for. But after so many days and nights of talking and soft touches, held gazes and making out on his sofa, their mouths searching and hands roaming, getting lost in a heated haze of desire and need, she was just about ready to beg him to take her to bed. And when they finally made love, allowing pulse and breath and instinct to be their guide, something inside her that must have been laying dormant suddenly broke apart, released, something infinitely precious that binds them, timeless and beyond explanation. In that same moment, Ben told her that he loved her, and she acknowledged the truth of those words. She saw it flickering in the glossy depths of his eyes. She'd felt it in the reverence of his touch. So when she said she loved him too, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Like coming home, like the refrain of a song they'd been singing for countless years. Pulling her chilly feet back under the sheets, she stretched her calves a bit, working out the beginnings of a Charlie horse. She'd already visited the bathroom and scrubbed her mouth with a finger in a dab of his toothpaste a couple of hours ago, after she'd noticed he'd done the same. So she's content to lie there, alone with her thoughts, continuing to play with his hair and listen to the sound of his steady breathing. Being alone's nothing new for Ray. Self-sufficient and stubbornly independent, she'd had no choice to be anything but. Bouncing in and out of foster homes till she turned 18. She'd begun preparing for the day when she'd be on her own at the start of her sophomore year of high school, working as many shifts as she could at crappy fast food joints, the stench of fryer oil and greasy onions wafting from her tattered backpack and books, while she crammed for tests into the early morning hours, often running on nothing but Red Bull and the sheer force of will to get her through the classes to the next day, sleep being a luxury she wasn't always able to afford. But all the grease and cramming and sleepless nights had been worth it. When she left her final foster home on her 18th birthday, she'd already saved enough for the first 3 months' rent on a little one-bedroom upper in the decent neighbourhood in Chandria, a moderately sized city of 100,000, and had graduated with good enough grades to grant her entrance to Chandrilla University's engineering programme, which offered work study, allowing her to earn money to apply towards her tuition and expenses. And now, after 3 years of college, she had only a handful of acquaintances and even fewer friends It's not that she doesn't want to connect with people. She'll admit there's still a part of her that does, a little piece that wants to fit in, to be one of the group. But her efforts at connecting with others on a deeper level have never gone over well. So with each failed attempt, her emotional walls rose higher and higher, mortared by humiliation and fury. And Ray's not surprised there aren't many people with the patience or desire to scale them. Until she met Ben, and all those old walls crumbled to dust at his feet. Ray's always been good at fixing things, but even her tinkering capabilities have limits. So when her trusty 67 Harley Sportster started acting up a few weeks ago, she finally gave in and brought her bike into a repair shop. He was elbows deep in an engine covered in grease, muttering and cursing when she first saw him. She'd later find out that while he'd grown up fixing cars, his father had been one of the best mechanics in the city. It had been many years since he'd been under the hood, having just returned home after an almost decade-long absence, after walking away from what he referred to as a soul-sucking career as a corporate attorney and an absolute tyrant of a boss, not to mention a cushy penthouse apartment and a 6-figure salary to boot. Small price to pay, he'd said matter-of-factly, the warmth in his eyes and contentment radiating off of him like a solar flare. Told her he absolutely believed it too. He had moved into the furnished apartment above the shop. His father Han had been renting it out, but as luck would have it, the former tenant decided to move on last month. Ben's mother Leia had given it a sprucing up, replacing the old furniture covers with new ones in a rich mulberry shade, and by bringing in a few green potted plants, a couple of creeping figs and a sprawling philodendron in a hanging basket, which Ray thinks looks particularly nice, thriving in its spot over the large east-facing window in the main room. To give some colour, Ben had said with a slight roll of his eyes. But Ray could tell he was pleased by her efforts. Ray had only met them once, but she got the impression his parents were so thrilled and relieved to have him home that he'd asked for the moon, they would have done anything in their power to get it for him. She stifles a yawn. She's getting sleepy again. She's just starting to doze off when Ben shifts against her. Thunder rolls in the distance and the breeze picks up, swirling the curtains in a frenzied dance against the window. He lifts his head from her chest, his eyes opening slowly. "Morning, sweetheart," he says, his low voice thick and rough with sleep. Sweetheart. The endearment lights her up from inside and makes her belly swoop. He'd begun calling her that almost right away, and the fervour in his eyes when he says it tells her that perhaps it means something more than either of them realise. He is so beautiful, Ben. She tracks the smattering of beauty marks dotting his pale complexion to the sensual curve of his plush pink lips, before meeting his gaze, his deep-set eyes shaded, a dark whiskey in the morning light. Ben looks at her in a way no one else ever has before, as though she's someone, as though she matters. She likes it more than she cares to admit. "Hi," she whispers back. Her heart trips against her ribs, something it's been doing more and more lately. Ben hums and readjusts their position, stretching out on his back and settling her against his side. His left arm curls around her, his palm pressing securely against her waist, while his other hand finds hers, lacing their fingers together to rest over his heart, bumping strong and steady. Her cheek presses against his shoulder, and her eyes wander against the enticing view of his well-defined chest and abs. A mark on his stomach over his ribs catches her eye, and she lifts her head. Has he been hurt? She untangles her hand from his and sits up to get a better look. "It's a birthmark," he says, gently stroking his hand along her bare back. She turns to look at him, finding his gaze soft and heavy-lidded. She nods. Her fingers skate lightly over his abdomen. The silver dollar-sized mark is flat, the same texture as the rest of his skin, just a few shades darker with blurred edges, almost like the skin has been scorched, burned. You know, some cultures believe a birthmark is from a past life, showing how the person was killed. Ray hears the words coming out of her mouth, and it's too late to stop them. She cringes. Damn it, what a batshit crazy thing to say. She must have read it somewhere once, but still. A cold shiver runs down her spine, leaving a trail of goosebumps in its wake. It's a horrible thought. One she doesn't even want to linger over, the thought of someone killing Ben. And besides, she doesn't even believe in the idea of past lives. It's complete nonsense, and yet a strange, heavy sense of foreboding falls over her. A streak of lightning flashes across the sky, followed by another deep roll of thunder. The sky's turned black now, but oddly enough the wind's died down, suspending the world in stillness, in a duplicitous sense of calm, because somehow Ray knows the storm is on its way. Ben seems oblivious to it all. He slants her a slow, gritted smile before rolling her onto her back, settling between her thighs, his black shaggy hair falling around his face. She feels him hot and hard, nudging against her folds. A moan escapes her lips. She's wet already. Thoughts of storms and past lives immediately fall away as Ben shunts into her, easy and deep. She tilts her head back and sighs, running her hands over his shoulders and biceps before he leans down, trailing sweet kisses along her throat. But he stops for a moment to murmur against the shell of her ear. Well, if that's the case, I'm sure I probably deserved it. Ray is dreaming. At least, she's pretty sure she's dreaming. Black velvet wraps around her consciousness with the sensation of falling. No, wait, not falling. Floating. She's weightless, drifting along a wandering current in a river of infinite night. Even though she's surrounded by nothing but empty void, she's not afraid. The starless sky whispers there is nothing to fear here, and she believes it. It's too calm, too still to offer anything but peace and protection from harm, but her contentment is short-lived. Jettisoned from the soft blackness like she's been shot from a cannon, Ray's feet slip out from under her and she cries, landing on her tailbone, the freezing wet surface instantly soaking her to the skin. The turbulent roar from the ocean fills her ears as she's doused in frigid sea spray, and she sputters, momentarily deaf and blind, gasping for breath from the shock and the cold. She wipes her eyes and her face with her hands, gathering her bearings before attempting to stand. Now she knows she must be dreaming. Colossal waves crest and crash against the great metal behemoth, stretching out far and wide, whether it's the rusted ruins of an aircraft or a shipwreck. She isn't sure, but she can feel the permanence of it, as though it had long ago resigned to its fate. Tenacious and enduring, perhaps forged in the fires of hell itself, it stubbornly refuses to surrender to the constant onslaught of the sea. What is it and how it ended up here are mysteries, and she has no answers. She rubs her eyes again and looks out toward the horizon, searching for landmarks that might give her some clues, but a dense white fog cloaks the mountains in the distance. Ray swears the longer she stares, the bigger they get, their shadows encroaching like sentinels of the sea sworn to protect its secrets. Nothing about the scene is familiar, and yet intuition tugs at the back of her mind. You know this place, her heart whispers. Dark energy crackles through the air, something ferocious and sinister, something ancient and powerful that can seep under one's skin if they allow it, if they've already been enthralled by its siren call once before. It's so powerful Ray can feel it down to her marrow, but it doesn't threaten. Instead, it welcomes her, embracing her as if it were an old friend. She realizes it's not just all around her, it's speaking to her from within. He's coming, it warns, in a voice uncharred, as putrid as brimstone. He's coming to kill you, Ray. You must kill him first. Her hackles rise. Who's coming? She doesn't have to wait long to find out. Through the heavy mist, a massive black figure looms, making its approach. Her pulse thrums wildly, and her hand reaches to her hip instinctively where it wraps around a cold metal cylinder. She detaches it from her belt and looks down. From within its shiny silver casing, the weapon emits a low, joyful hum as though it's been expecting her, ready and waiting for her next command. Apprehension begins to subside, for if not actual memories, impressions and emotions are starting to form in her heart and filter through her mind, familiar and foreign at the same time. It's if she's reading a favourite book written in a language she hasn't fully learned yet. She knows with no amount of uncertainty that whatever this place is, it's been waiting for her. Whatever lies ahead is already part of her, woven into her very essence. It feels something like destiny. She inhales deeply, filling her lungs with salt and resolve. Her knuckles whiten around her weapon, and she crouches into fighting stance. When the figure emerges from the fog, Ray's pulse spikes even higher. A laugh of relief and surprise bubbles from her throat. It's Ben! He stalks toward her. Like her, he's soaked to the bone. His raven hair is plastered to his skull, and he looks so sullen and miserable that she can't help but be amused. A warm, affectionate smile tugs at her lips. He hesitates, and she senses his wavering confusion, but he brushes it aside and continues his approach. A similar weapon is holstered at his hip, though his is much bigger than hers, with its casing that's a crude mess of exposed wires and painted a flat shade of charcoal. Pulling from his belt, he ignites it with a flourish, its long ruby blade and crossguard crackling violently in the mist, though he keeps it lowered to his side, for now. A creeping sense of dread prickles along her spine, and she swallows thickly as she studies him further. At 6'3", Ben is impressively tall, with wide shoulders and thick arms that never fail to make her a little weak at the knees, but where Ben moves with an easy, confident gait, swagger, she'd once teased him with a cheeky grin. The man before her is all barely contained fury. Stomping toward her in his heavy black boots, Ray will admit he strikes a magnificent, if threatening, figure. Every inch of his fair skin is covered in unrelieved militant black, down to the severe leather gloves and the absurdly dramatic cape billowing around his shoulders. She gawps. When Ben's feeling a little extra, he might pull out his prized pair of vintage Air Jordans with a bright red swoosh, making quite the bold statement on his size 14 feet. But it's not this man's questionable fashion choices that has her stomach twisting in knots. It's his eyes. Instead of Ben's steady warmth, his contentment, she finds only a haunted, furious determination. His entire being vibrates with it, a burning want, a focus, a single-mindedness driving him and his every decision. He's a towering vortex, willing to destroy anything or anyone who gets in his way. This is not a man she can flirt with or tease or kiss out of his bad mood. This man is a warrior, whose first instinct has always been to fight hard or die trying. Ray's compassion aches for him, for she senses a churning well of hurt and sorrow, of bitterness and longing buried deep beneath his fury. Something truly horrible must have happened to make him this way, and even though he's Ben, she's beginning to understand he's not exactly her Ben. And yet her heart does not make the distinction. Her devotion is as strong as ever. Her fierce, consuming love for him glows brightly just the same. He inhales sharply, his eyes whitening as he goes completely still, unblinking. His gaze wavers and with uncertainty, and in those deep whiskey eyes she catches a glimpse of something familiar, something soft, something Ben. Hope blooms in her chest. Maybe it's not too late for him after all, and with her help maybe there's still a chance for him to turn from this blind path of fury and destruction to become the man she knows he is deep down, the man he's meant to be. Suddenly his nostrils flare, his full lips twist into a scowl. He gives his head a rough shake as though to clear it. His brow furrows and her stomach sinks. Can't he sense her the way she senses him? Doesn't he know she loves him? He rushes forward with a snarl, his weapon drawn. She ignores the sharp pang of disappointment and ignites her own, a blade of brilliant sapphire light bursting smoothly from the silver hilt. Somehow she knew it would be blue. Their blades collide in a clash of mystical energy and charged particles, the impact sending a shockwave all the way down her bones. But even though she's never even held a sword before, she knows these moves, knows exactly how to spin and duck and defend herself from his blows. Her arms burn with fatigue as a thin sheen of sweat breaks out on her skin. Her own agility and skill should surprise her, but it does not. This is more than just muscle memory. It's a dance they've performed countless times, perfected in a place beyond the stars and foretold by her blood since the day she was born. Tale as old as time, she thinks wryly, as she parries another upward swing. But it proves to be a mistake. He gains the advantage and looms over her, pressing against her with their blades crossed overhead, the heat from his large body warming her skin, where it touches through her soaked, virtually translucent clothing. He's seething with rage, and yet just beneath that, she feels his desire for her pumping, hot and needy through his veins, sending an unexpected lick of arousal through her core.
Don't try to trick me, Ray. It won't work.
He grits through clenched teeth.
You still think you can turn me?
The darkness curls and thickens around them, the sinister energy in this place unfurling its beastly wings, sinking its talons into the soft, vulnerable corners of their minds. Ray's losing herself with each passing second, falling deeper and deeper, helpless from succumbing to its thrall, and Ben's volatile emotions grow, taking on a malicious, thorny edge. So do her own. His eyes are smouldering coals, and she sees his conflict swirling in the blackened depths, senses it through the current flowing between them. He wants to dominate her, make her submit to him in every way. But if she keeps resisting him, he'll be left with no choice. Part of him wishes it weren't so, but it's the only way to be free of this pain. He has to kill her. A burst of fear and rage sears through her, fortified by that perpetual darkness. She spreads her arms wide, realizing she can harness its power to push him away. He stumbles back, managing to keep his footing, but she slips and falls, landing hard on the ground, her weapon deactivating, loosing from her grasp. Staring down at her, his face a blank mask as he raises the crimson blade, but she can tell by the determined set of his jaw he's made his decision. She lets her eyes drift shut and waits for it. Her heart is thundering against her ribs because even in her darkest final moments, it will continue to beat for him until her very last. The air around them suddenly shifts, drifting over them at first, then through them, a gentle sphere of light brushing against the furthest reaches of her soul. It makes Ben pause, breaking the darkness's hold over him. The red blade retracts, the hilt tumbles from his grip.
But the darkness in her is too deeply rooted. It still has her firmly in its clutches, and once again it commands her. Do it, Ray. Kill him. Do it now.
As swift as an arrow, her own hand reaches up to catch it.
Yes, the voice urges. Now.
The memory of Ben's rich, deep voice and dimpled smile flash across her mind just as her thumb hits the switch, but it's too late. Crimson light shoots forth and pierces his torso, just below his heart.
I'm sure I probably deserved it.
The darkness shrieks with victory and releases its claws from her mind. She retracts the blade and Ben slumps to the ground. The hole burned through his doublet, revealing a ghastly patch of cauterized flesh. Oh God. No longer under its vile, treacherous influence, Ray faces the harsh reality of what she's done. Stricken, she freezes to the spot. She's seen enough movies and shows to know it's a mortal wound, and his death is an inevitability, only a matter of time. Minutes, maybe. No.
No, no, no! Shock gives way to understanding and her whole body begins to tremble, his weapon slipping from her grasp. Panicked, desperate pleas race through her mind, silent prayers falling from her lips like pearls from a broken string. Instinctively, she turns her focus inward, searching for a remnant of that glorious light that passed through her earlier, and begs it to grant her mercy. Please, I'll do anything, give anything. He's wrong. He never deserved this. My life is his. You can have it, please. Just please don't let him die. Dizziness threatens to overtake her, so she crumples to her knees beside him, splaying a palm against Ben's soaked doublet. She bows her head and continues to pray for some kind of miracle. Frigid sea spray mingles with her tears, while the sharp ringing in her ears grows louder, drowning out the sound from the ocean's ceaseless waves. Her vision tunnels, just as every remaining bit of strength drains from her body. A pair of steady hands catching her from behind is the last thing she remembers before she's pulled under into that soft, weightless river of unconsciousness once again. Don't worry, we're not stopping there. We're doing more. This is what I was like, I don't know where to stop, because there is nowhere to stop. I cannot imagine having read along with this live. I would have been sat there like, refresh for like a week, waiting for each chapter. It's gorgeous. You wrote it. I said, wow, you blew me away with that. You wrote it. This is you. I'm just reading what you wrote. The prose, my God. Oh my goodness. Sorry, apologies for there's some of the prose in this is just gorgeous. And do go and click as well, because there's beautiful wallpapers on there. So, you know, click through and do go and have a look. The fight scene, the rhythm to it was almost like rap. It was gorgeous, like beat poetry. Stunning. Thank you very much. I really hope that you feel that it's doing you justice. But yeah, I can't leave people there. I said at least one more chapter. I was gonna read some of my own Fixit fic, but I'm tempted to just carry on and read this all the way through. But yeah, also please remember, do click through, go to the fics, give them kudos, give them comments, because the writers, you deserve. This is your work. I'm just reading it. This time, when Ray sinks into the soft blackness, she isn't alone. A voice, low and ethereal, calls to her through the silence. Ray, can you hear me? Please, Ray, try to remember. And she does, slowly at first, then faster. Memories flaring to life in her mind of a time and place she'd long forgotten. Voices and images for which she has no real understanding, and yet are scribed into her very soul. This universe, one different from her own, had once been torn apart by a great war, an epic battle that had raged on for centuries between the forces of good and evil. A universe where legends became truths and magic was reality, where its power could be felt and wielded by special ones, certain rare individuals. And over time, some of those individuals decided they wanted to control it, to bend it to their own agendas, in the name of either darkness or light. She and Ben were two of the strongest in this power. They ended up caught in the middle of a skirmish on opposite sides until the very end. She gasps, thunderstruck. She remembers now. After she'd run him through with his own blade, she'd been able to draw on that power, that incredible force, and use it to heal him. And then she'd left him there, in the middle of the icy sea, stealing a ship, overcome by the shame of her own actions. But he'd followed her anyway.
She can feel it again now, the staggering sense of relief when she knew she wasn't alone, that he'd come back for her, that he'd decided after all to turn from the path he'd been on and join her instead, because he'd finally realised the right path was the one they travelled together. And then the battle ensued. Together they'd faced a great source of evil, a former emperor who'd once been vanquished but somehow returned and was now confined to a physical body, a grotesque, rotting corpse, an evil who'd seeded itself in Ben's mind since birth. Having sensed his great power, even then it had preyed upon him, whispering sweet, terrible lies to him, twisting his perceptions to suit its own nefarious intent for his whole entire life. A thick, violent hatred had fueled her resolve. Ben never stood a chance. She'd see to it this monster was destroyed, not only for the sake of the galaxy, but for Ben. Deep underground within a shadowy stone cathedral, before an altar of poison and decay, she and Ben had stood united in front of the monster twin, sapphire blades drawn. It had sensed their bond, their connection, and wanted it for itself. The glorious oneness Ray had felt from the moment she and Ben had first met. And now, thanks to the Emperor, it had a name. A dyad in the Force, it crooned, unseen for generations. Its crusted, oozing gash of a mouth curled into something resembling a smile. Power like life itself. And so they were paralysed, and Drain dropped unconscious to the floor, like marionettes who'd had their strings cut, weakened by the monster made thousands times more powerful with their stolen bond. And Ray had no choice but to call upon the ghosts of generations past, to ask for the strength to defeat the Emperor once and for all. And then Ray frowns, trying to remember what happened next, but it's as if she's run up against a wall. As hard as she tries, she's unable to recall the rest. The remaining images begin to fade, floating away from her mind like petals in the water, when all of a sudden awareness takes over, yanking her out of her memories, and from that deep velvety blackness she gasps, heart pounding and pulse racing, and blinks open her eyes. Starships hover and battle in the sky overhead, each blast an explosion and shriek of twisting metal, a drum hole in her chest, echoing through the cavern, scattered debris falling in glittering trails, lighting the ruins of the otherwise dark, demolished cathedral. Dankness and the damp seeps through her clothes and into her skin, so she rolls to her side and sits up, finding herself on the same cold stone floor from her memories. Over to her left are the charred, obliterated remains of the Emperor, some bits of him still smoking in fragments across the ground. Her heart leaps in alarm. Ben! What happened to Ben? A rustle of fabric to her right let her know she's not alone. Jumping quickly to her feet, she expects to feel achy and sore from battle, and is surprised that she doesn't. She frowns. That doesn't seem right. Apprehension prickles the hairs on the nape. She assesses the mysterious, hooded stranger standing next to her. Who? She begins, but is cut off by the figure extending an arm and pointing to something behind her. Ray turns, finding cut deep through the cavern amid the fallen ruins and rubble, a long, jagged crevasse, a pit, and just beyond that, a handful of yards away, a small body dressed in white lies motionless on the dusty cave floor. She realises with a dawning sense of horror. It's her. A low, muffled groan draws her attention back to the pit. A severely wounded and bloody Ben, his pale complexion waxy where it's not purpled over by bruises, is using every last bit of physical strength to drag himself up and out of the crevasse. Once he reaches the top, he hobbles towards the figure in white, but his leg gives out, so he drops to his hands and knees and crawls the remaining distance. His throat closes and anguished tears blur her vision. She can tell, even from here, that he must have dozens of broken bones, and God knows how many internal injuries. He must be in excruciating pain. But all she can sense from him is overwhelming panic and fear. Not for himself, only for her. It's too much. Ben! She cries out and starts rushing toward him, but the hooded figure reaches forward and grips her shoulders, restraining her. They can't see or hear us, it rasps, voice gentle but firm. Ben has finally reached the spot where she lies. He turns over her still form, revealing her own wide eyes staring up at the sky, cold and grey and lifeless. Oh God. Ray's stomach clenches and she covers her hands over her mouth to stifle a scream. Meanwhile, she can sense Ben's panic receding, swallowed up by despair. A great wave of agony and heartbreak crashing over him at the realization that she's really gone. All she can do is watch helplessly as he hauls her body over his lap, crushing her to his chest, rocking and cradling her like a doll. A broken, shattered doll. His eyes gloss over with tears and his chin quivers, and in her mind she can hear his frantic, desperate pleas begging the same forces that had given her strength in her time of need. But they go unanswered. Evidently whoever or whatever had decided to help them before, when its assistance was needed to achieve their higher purpose, had now washed their hands of Ben and Ray once and for all. The scene is too heavy, too tragic, and she can no longer bear to watch. Instead, she turns to the mysterious cloaked figure at her side, silently imploring it, "Please, help us." But it remains impassive and stoic as ever. She does, however, catch a waver, a tremble in the space between them. This is difficult for it to witness as well. But then something in the surrounding atmosphere shifts, changes. She turns back to find Ben meditating, calling on that reserve of golden light inside him, the same miraculous light she herself had called upon when she had struck him down. He lays her gently over his lap, pressing a giant hand against her stomach, closes his eyes, focusing all his remaining strength solely upon her. Panic begins to splinter in her chest. Ben is already so weakened, just barely hanging on after the battle. It's too much. He's giving her too much. Suddenly, her own bleeding, wounded hand slaps over the one laid across her belly, and Ray sighs with relief as her counterpart blinks, the life returning to her eyes. Elation floods through her, floods through all of them. She's alive. They both are. They survived. But their shared joy is short-lived. It happens so quickly. Ray can scarcely believe it. A few gentle touches, one precious kiss, and then Ben is slumping backwards, closing his eyes and fading away into nothingness. Before he vanishes completely, his voice resonates strong and deep in her mind. "I'll always be with you, sweetheart. I promise." Her counterpart's eyes fill with tears. Ray knows she's heard it too. And just like that, Ben is gone. Ray hops back from a split winding under her feet as the entire cavern begins to shake with a low, thunderous roar, with rocks tumbling and pebbles skittering in all directions across the shifting, quaking floor. She drops to a couch, bracing herself as she lifts her gaze to the opening over the cathedral. Starships continue exploding above, and while the battle might have been won, the war is clearly not over. Her eyes widen in disbelief as her counterpart scrambles up off the ground and searches for a way out. Her mystical abilities needed elsewhere to finish the war, to save the galaxy. But before she goes, she scoops up Ben's black sweater, blood and sweat stained and ruined by the hole from where she'd run him through earlier, and sprints out of the cavern, never looking back. A stab of fury cuts through her. How dare she just leave him like that? She simmers, outraged. Doesn't she even care? But after a few minutes, she exhales, relaxing the fists clenched at her sides, and reconsiders. Perhaps Ray is judging herself too harshly. Maybe later, days from now, after the dust settles, she'll let herself think about him. After the war is declared over,
and she is being hailed a hero when she's lying on some lumpy mattress alone in some ramshackle barracks. Maybe she'll wrap her arms around that sweater, bury her face into it to muffle her sobs, crying herself into a shallow, fitful sleep. The cavern's rumbling begins to lessen while Ray moves closer toward the spot where Ben had lain, unable to take her eyes off it. Over time, maybe the dusty sweater and that invisible tether to Ben will be enough to start filling that fissure in her soul, and she'll be grateful to have even a little something to help her make it through all the long, lonely days and nights sure to come. Enough, perhaps, but just barely. But Ray is no superhero. She's never been imbued with mystical strength and powers. She's just a girl. A foster kid, touch-starved and lonesome, who fell in love with a boy, and for her, simply carrying some nebulous version of him around with her for the rest of her life is not enough. It's only been minutes since Ben vanished. Desperately, she searches for that bright, beautiful oneness inside her, only to be reminded that her heart makes no distinction as to space or time where her love for him is concerned. It transcends everything. She realizes when she still finds nothing but a hollow, aching shell, as if his death, like her love, transcends everything too. The weight of never seeing Ben again settles across her like a cloak of ashes, and as the cavern quiets and stills, a recent memory flashes across her mind. It was their 6th date, but who was counting? They had a lifetime of dates, of romantic trips and adventures stretched out ahead of them. For this summer alone, they'd already begun making plans. He was going to take her to the Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago. She was going to drive him up to Long Lake and teach him how to fish the perch and bluegill, so abundant there this time of year. That night, Ben's arms were warm and strong around her, his heart thudding against her cheek as he held her close while they slow danced in the early morning hours. After stopping on a whim at some old country tavern off the beaten path, swaying gently to the ancient jukebox, stuck playing Tennessee whiskey on repeat, getting so lost in each other's that they couldn't tell if the light outside meant the sun was coming up, or if the bartender had flipped on the parking lot's flickering old fluorescence. Her heart danced too, brimming with something so fierce and consuming she was surprised her body was able to contain it. Did you ever think you could feel like this? She'd wondered dreamily, and it wasn't until he was sliding a finger under her chin and tilting her face up to look at him that she'd realised she'd spoken aloud. He shook his head, his eyes black and glittering in the soft neon lights, and in them she found all the first evening stars that she had ever dared to wish upon. Never. He bent to press a warm, lingering kiss against her lips. Not until I met you. Clutching a hand over her chest with a choked sob, she wished in vain for some sort of absolution as the realization sets in and takes root. He'd loved her enough to give his very life for hers, and now he was gone. Forever. I'll always be with you, sweetheart, I promise. She screams his name into the empty cavern until her throat is raw and bleeding and collapses to the ground, clawing her nails into the dirt where he'd lain, watering it into mud with her tears. God help her. It would never be enough. Time passes, how much she doesn't really know, or even care. There's so much death and devastation around her. It flows over her soul like molten lava, consuming her until she can scarcely breathe. The ache in her chest is beginning to burn, so Ray absently presses against it, as if it could help, as if anything ever could. Her eyes keep drifting back to the cold, empty spot where Ben was just moments before. Only a lifetime ago. She begins to tremble and has no idea if it's a good sign or not. All she knows is that she could be going into shock.
The pain in her chest is now ramping up to agonising, and a sheen of sweat beads on her forehead as nausea rolls in her stomach. She startles when a light hand comes to rest on the top of her head. She'd almost completely forgotten. A spike of rage pierces through her stupor, and she jumps up, whirling on the mysterious figure. "Who are you?" she cries. "What do you want from us? Why would you bring me here?" The figure lifts its hands and pushes back the hood, revealing the face of a woman, sympathy wreathed upon her delicate features. Ray blinks. She's not sure why, but she wasn't expecting a woman. Over her severe dark robes, her long brunette hair cascades in perfect ringlets almost reaching her waist. Her beautiful face is young, but her deep brown eyes are very old and veiled by an undeniable sadness. "Who are you?" she repeats, unable to hide the tremor in her voice. Her eyes are familiar to Ray in a way she can't bear to think about right now, and an icy fear begins to tingle at her nape. Despite her wariness, Ray can tell this woman means no harm. She radiates a shimmering aura of empathy and kindness, with a smile so pure it could knock an angel right out of the heavens. "I'm here to guide you, Ray," she says gently, "to show you who you were, who you'll become, to show you your destiny." Ray sniffles, wiping her nose on her sleeve, and shakes her head. So far, she's witnessed nothing here but tragedy and death, the heart-wrenching loss of a cherished love, and all that could have been paying the ultimate price for a victory not even her own. "So this is it?" She spat bitterly, her lips twisting into a snarl. "This is where it ends? We were used to fulfill a mighty purpose, and Ben died for it, without ever having had a chance to really live?" Her heart keens, nothing but a useless lump beneath her breast, shredded and bloody. The woman's eyes are serene and shining despite the surrounding darkness. She raises an arm to touch her, offering comfort, but Ray dodges out of her reach. The woman sighs. "I'm truly sorry, my dear. I know you're hurting right now, but don't give up hope just yet. Stubbornness and defiance run deep on both sides of our family, and my grandson is as hard-headed as they come." Ray's brow furrows despite herself. Grandson? The woman's lips twitch at her reaction, and her eyes sparkle with mirth as she continues. Ben might have inherited the Skywalker impetuousness, but he's a lot more like me than he'll ever know. And at that, a flicker of sorrow passes over her features, but it vanishes in almost the same instant. Before she can ask what a Skywalker is, the mysterious woman fixes Ray with a warm, knowing smile. "And rest assured, my dear, like the others before him, he had set the galaxy ablaze for those he loves." Looking at her tenderly, she reaches over to sweep a thumb over her cheek, brushing away her tears, and this time Ray lets her. The gesture is sweet, motherly. For a breathtaking moment, the unbearable pain in her chest diminishes. "Don't worry, my precious one. For you and Ben, this is only the beginning." So, we've got 2 more chapters and we've got about 20 minutes. So I know, right? Avienda says the depth, and yeah, absolutely. The depth of this, the just, and yeah. Followers of the stream will know how much I love getting to do my Padme voice. So, I have a question. It's really, really good. Do you want to go, do you want... There's so much emotion. I'm just reading what you wrote. Fedovan says, "You read that with so much emotion. I'm blown away." I'm like, Honestly, I just read what you wrote. You wrote it with so much emotion that we're all blown away. It's beautiful. So, we're not going to be able to get both of the remaining chapters in on the stream. There's a 2 hour stream. You're the one that said we should go to a 2 hour stream, Avienda. So we've only got 20 minutes left. So do we want to take a 5-minute break and then we'll go over and we'll do the last 2 chapters? Is that what people want? If that's what you want, then we'll do it. But if it snows tomorrow and I have to go sledging on Sleep Deck, I'll tell you what, we'll do it. We'll go for a 5-minute break. I want to promise from everybody, all 3 of you in the chat, that you will go and get everybody to sign up for the Christmas stream on Wednesday. All right. Okay, it's 23:40, so I will see you in 5 minutes. Everybody, I need to put some more hot water in my cup anyway, because otherwise I'm not going to make it through another 2 chapters. So, see you back here at 1:45. I'm not sure what's going on. It's doing things. I can't see the chat. Oh. Oh, you were saying lovely things about me while I was in the bathroom. Thank you, my lovelies. Let's wait, make sure everybody's back. Okay, Avianda is back. There's Tampia says it doesn't take away from the absolutely lush and gorgeous prose, but engaging in the sense just heightens the experience. I say if you want to go for a heightened experience, try reciting out loud, because living that text is a whole another way to experience it, because you do absolutely sink into it and you feel every beat of it. I'm so glad you're enjoying it, Vedvan. I really am. I snuck into the Facebook and I saw how excited you were on there, and it was just lovely to see. I am there in the Facebook group. Just it's not like MKR. I honestly, you can see that you've poured your soul into it. It's an incredible piece of work, and you should be massively proud. Right. Are you all tucked in? Ready for your bedtime story? Oh. When Ray was barely a teenager, she had dreamed of a field. A field so beautiful, so vivid. She'd scribbled a short, hasty description of it in the journal she always kept nearby the second she was awake and oriented enough to find a pen. And for years afterwards, whenever she'd get upset or lonely, she'd close her eyes and pretend she was there, because just the memory of it would soothe her, like nothing else could. Everything was rich and golden, with tall grass and wildflowers and all the colours of the rainbow. And there were mountains in the distance, and the sun was setting behind them. I felt so safe. I wish I could go there for real. And now, after another brief dive through the rivers of night, she finds herself standing in the middle of it. This is incredible, she says to Ben's grandmother, Padme. Ray has learned to only nods, a small secretive smile on their lips. I had several names, royal designations, and lofty titles when I was alive, she said casually when Ray asked what to call her, but offered no further explanation. Once you've passed on, none of those things really matter anymore. I am forever now, and always will be, just Padme. So Ben had not only been a mystical warrior, he'd also been descended from royalty. That explains a few things, Ray had thought, smiling softly to herself as Ben's impeccable table manners and perfect hair sprang to mind. Her heart was fractionally lighter after Padme's assurances to not give up hope. But that pain inside her continued to burn, a chronic ache she was convinced would never fully heal. What is this place? Ray asked in a hushed voice, taking it all in. It's like being in a world inside a flower, if such a thing were possible. Stretching across to an infinite horizon, the field is a living jewel, where green grasses grow and wildflowers bloom, black-eyed Susans and scarlet aster and purple milkweed as far as the eye can see. Tall prairie grass surrounds the small clearing where they stand, waving gently in the light breeze, and the setting sun bathes the entire landscape in a warm, golden light, dipping low behind the smoke-blue, snow-capped mountains. The air is sweet and crisp like pear blossoms on the first day of spring. A divine energy flows all around them, a calm, quiet tranquility, unlike anything Ray has ever felt before. Padme smiles serenely. It doesn't have a name, at least not one everyone agrees upon. Some might call it heaven, others nirvana, but essentially, it's where our souls go when they achieve ultimate enlightenment. At the edge of the clearing, a shimmering veil of blue light begins to form, softly at first, but it becomes more intense as it spreads, growing larger and wider. As she studies it more closely, Ray reveals it's a cluster of people, dozens of them, their individual figures barely defined by blurry outlines within the cerulean glow. And then across from the cloud of blue, another figure emerges from the grass, and Ray's heart stops. It's Ben, whole, healed, and every bit as handsome as he ever was. A light breeze sweeps his sable hair across his brow, and he brushes it aside. It's a gesture that's so familiar. The tears gather in her eyes and spill down her cheeks. He's still wearing the same clothes he died in. A glimpse of pale flesh winking from the hole in his sweater as he crosses into the clearing. A watery, relieved chuckle bubbles up from her chest. Just as she's about to break into a run and launch herself into his arms, she stops herself, remembering at the last second Padme's warning that they can't be seen or heard. They're called the Jedi, Padme explains, gesturing toward the huddle of glowing blue figures. Force sensitives like you and Ben, who died but now live on in spirit form. The shape of a memory brushes along Ray's mind. She had called to them. In her most desperate hour, these ghosts of the Jedi, be with me. They believed in the power of light, but also believed human attachments, as well as things like love and passion, could only lead to a fall to the dark. Padme continues, a shadow passing over her features, but before Ray can consider it further, the ghosts speak. Ben Solo, they greet him in unison, the effect more similar to one single voice rather than many separate ones. You have made a great sacrifice in the name of the Jedi. Your penance has not gone unnoticed. Your noble end has made you worthy of ascending to the highest pinnacle a Jedi can reach. Eternal rest and peace in the cosmic force. Ben frowns, rubbing his chest absently, unimpressed by the appearance of these glowing blue figures and their pronouncement. What? He stops himself, shaking his head. I made no sacrifice in the name of the Jedi. He pauses a moment, contemplating. You mean healing Ray? I did that for her. His expression darkens, and his eyes flash with amber fire. Make no mistake, I did that only for her. Because he cuts off, rolling his jaw as he considers the assembly of ghosts before him. Because she deserves to live. Of course, she'd seen it with her own eyes. How he'd held her so carefully in that desolate cavern, watched as he flooded her with his gilded light and brought her back to life. But it's different to him admit out loud that he did it for her, even though she knows he's holding back the full truth of why he did what he did. It's because of that unspoken reason something inside her splinters and breaks all over again. You didn't? The Jedi regard him skeptically. Ben casts his gaze to the ground, and Ray aches for him, sensing the source of his anguish. He's still haunted by the memory of her face, of her frozen eyes, staring unseen at the sky above the cathedral. He shakes his head again, as if to clear it, and pins them with a hard look. If you're asking if I'd do it differently, then no, I wouldn't. If it's left to me to choose which one of us is to live, then it's always going to be her. He says it so adamantly, with so much conviction, that if she hadn't seen it for herself, Ray would never believe there'd ever been a time they'd fought each other, loathed each other, been sworn enemies. And it's with a sudden, bittersweet pang of remorse she realises that maybe for him, she never truly was. A ripple of something, satisfaction perhaps, runs through the Jedi, but Ben is too distracted to notice. His brow furrows as he continues rubbing his chest.
This pain, he murmurs, before addressing them again. Why am I still feeling it? If I'm dead, shouldn't it have healed like the rest of my injuries?
The Jedi seem unconcerned.
The remnants says your severed dyad constriction will persist until Rey eventually joins you in the cosmic force. Time passes differently here, and for you, Ben Solo, it won't feel like very long at all.
This gives him pause as he puts it together, hearing the words they don't say.
For me, he says slowly. But what about for Rey?
His eyes widen in alarm as the implication sinks in.
You mean she feels it too?
The ghosts are wholly dismissive.
Rey is strong. She carries the strength of all the Jedi now. You needn't worry about her. Until her time comes, she'll endure.
Ben's eyes narrow, and his fists clench at his sides.
You mean you used her as a weapon, knowing full well she couldn't survive that massive surge of energy. She's only alive right now because I had something left to give. Otherwise we'd both be dead, and you still will have achieved your glorious
Purpose. His voice drops dangerously low, trembling with rage.
You used her, then you left her to die, and now she's gonna suffer the rest of her life because of it. You can't do that to her, not after everything she's been through.
The ghosts remain unsympathetic.
All Jedi have known suffering. Well, maybe we're no Jedi,
he roars, and a flock of birds take flight from a nearby tree, disappearing into the fiery orange ball beginning to dip below the horizon. Ben levels the huddle with a piercing glare.
We're no Jedi.
He repeats his words glazed with an icy definitiveness. Out of the corner of her eye, Padme gives a tiny nod and Rey glances over, catching the small smile lifting one corner of her mouth. With a growl, Ben kicks a small egg-shaped stone near his foot. It flies in the air, sailing in a high arc against the vibrant topaz sky, before landing with a faint thud somewhere in the bush. The ghosts watch impassively from their spot at the edge of the clearing as Ben's dark, wild eyes search along the horizon, as if some sort of solution will just magically appear to him out of thin air.
No,
he huffs, muttering to himself.
There must be some other way.
The Jedi might have been many things, wise perhaps, superior absolutely, but they must not be capable of guile. Because Rey picks up on the united wave of ambivalence the same way Ben does. He turns his head and looks at them sharply.
Is there another way?
They heave a collective world-weary sigh.
No Jedi who reaches this pinnacle as you have, Ben Solo, has ever chosen the alternative.
His jaw clenches and his nostrils flare.
Try me.
They hesitate before deciding better of it, once they sense Ben's ire.
If one feels they have more to do, that their soul has not yet attained fulfillment, they may choose to return to the mortal coil to start the journey again.
Ben is silent for a few moments while he considers this.
What happens to Rey?
He asks finally.
Your dyad, so her soul is connected to yours. Where yours goes, hers will follow.
They admit somewhat reluctantly, when Ben's eyes light with hope.
But it won't be universe as you know now.
They continue, a severe note of warning.
You won't have the Force. Your souls will start from scratch, a clean slate. It could take years, centuries even, before you reach this peak again.
A hush falls over the field.
Are you certain you could make that choice?
The Jedi press forward, finding a chink in Ben's armour, a sign of weakness.
Not only for yourself, but for Rey. Are you certain she returns your devotion?
For the first time since he entered the clearing, Ben's gaze falters. His shoulders slump. his steadfast confidence and resolve wavering. No, oh no, Ray's anger bubbles to the surface. She won't allow it. Not anyone, especially not a bunch of dead wizards with a superiority complex to make him doubt her feelings for him. Not for a second. She closes her eyes and takes a deep breath and prays for another miracle. It's already been a whole day of miracles. What's the harm of trying for one more? Turning her attention inward, she searches her memories, her emotions, and finds that while the Emperor might have stolen their bond, he couldn't touch their love. It's still there, smouldering under the ashes, and she grabs hold of it, that beautiful burning ember, and concentrates with her whole, entire being. Yes, Ben. 1,000 times yes, she thinks feverishly. I'd slay the dragon, suffer the curse, eat the poisoned apple, I'd die again 1,000 times over, if I knew it meant we'd be together. Because you're worth it all, Ben. You're everything to me. And I know you promised you'd always be with me. That isn't enough. Not like this. I love you. I need you to really be with me. To hold me and to love me every day and every night. Please, Ben. I've only ever wanted one thing in my whole life. And that's you. Just you. Ray blinks, opens her eyes, and is shocked by a warm, familiar whisky gaze meeting hers. A smile tugs at the corner of his mouth, dimple flashing, and Ben gives a barely perceptible nod in her direction before turning back to the mass of glowing blue figures. Ray's heart pounds wildly as an immense wave of joy washes over her, momentarily soothing that dull ache in her chest. Next to her, Padme shakes her head. Impossible, she whispers, but there's an unmistakable note of wonder in her voice. With his faith restored, Ben once again addresses the Jedi. I'm positive. Send me back. No sooner are the words out of his mouth than a jagged energy sizzles through the air. One of the figures parts from the huddle. The bearded ghost approaches Ben, stepping a few feet in front of him, and shakes his head. Ben, listen to me, he implores. You have no idea what you're doing. Ben not only appears unsurprised by the objection, but has the distinct impression he was expecting it. He regards the lone Jedi with an air of disdain, folding his arms across his broad chest with one eyebrow raised, while a thick tension builds in the space between them. I think I'm capable of making my own decisions, Luke, whether you or not you agree with them. Her brow furrows. Luke? Padme quickly supplies the answer. Ben's former master and mentor. She hesitates before sighing. And his uncle, which of course also makes him my son. Ray's eyes widen. Ben is simmering with an almost tangible fury, his jaw clenched, his posture ramrod stiff. Clearly, there's some unresolved bad blood between the two, and her heart seizes. You, Ben, capable of making sound decisions. His uncle barks out a sardonic laugh, and Ben's eyes narrow into slits. Going face to face with his erstwhile appearance like this must spark something buried deep down, because the ghost drops his placid demeanour and sputters like a boiling kettle, all blustery self-importance. You arrogant, impetuous boy, he scoffs. All those years spent training, and yet you learnt nothing. This is your destiny, every Jedi's destiny. To turn from it now is to spit in the eye of every single one of us who came before you. He fists his hands on his incorporeal hips, peers close to his nephew, pious and shrewd. Whilst I know you hold nothing sacred when it comes to the Jedi, Ben, even you, one of the most powerful Force users have ever lived, must understand how senseless and foolhardy this is. Next to her, Padme sighs and shakes her head. Rey suspects she doesn't hold anything sacred either when it comes to this thing called the Jedi, especially when Padme murmurs, Maker knows I love him, but he didn't get it from me. Warming to his argument, Luke throws his hands in the air, puffing up even further. For Christ's sake, Ben, this isn't like when you ran away to join Smoke in the First Order. We're talking about eternal peace, immortality. There's no greater achievement, no greater reward
be free of all mortal dilemma, to exist forever in a realm between the cosmic and the living force. He's in a lather, practically foaming at the mouth. Even now, after everything you've done, your defiance astounds me. He spits. Don't you understand? It will take centuries for you to reach this pinnacle again, Ben, if at all. How can you even think about throwing it all away?
But Ben is unaffected by his tirade, no longer rigid with anger, as if the more furiously his uncle opposes him, the stronger he's become in his own convictions. He remains perfectly composed, regarding the blue apparition calmly, with a smile so serene, Ray thinks her heart might shatter from the beauty of it. His eyes shimmer gold in the sun's setting rays, and his voice rings across the field, strong and true.
It's really quite simple, Luke. Again, and I will.
His gaze flicks over the huddle and back again before he rolls his wide shoulders, lifts his head high, with all the imperiousness his royal lineage would suggest.
Because I made a promise to a girl.
A low hum buzzes through the ghosts of the Jedi, and Luke's glowing form takes on a livid violet hue, but no one raises any further argument. That one statement, 8 little words. Ben has cast himself as a lost cause, no doubt about it. The black sheep, their wayward son, confirming what they had always expected. He's no Jedi after all. But the two of them have always been different from everyone else, haven't they? Ray Muse is already feeling lighter, as though the world has been lifted. It's a large part of what initially drew them to each other, like herself. Ben can't be held to anyone else's rules or expectations, and Ray loves him all the more for it. Luke takes one last long look at Ben and shakes his head, his expression stony, before stepping away and melding back into his brethren.
So it is to be done, Ben Solo,
the Jedi finally concede.
You and Ray shall enter the mortal universe simply as a man and a woman without any of your special sensitivities.
And almost as an afterthought they add with a heavy note of reluctance.
And may the Force be with you both.
The ground under their feet begins to tremble, while the air around them grows thick and hazy, until Ray can no longer make out the mountains in the distance, and the last golden remains of sunset fade into inky twilight. Even Ben and the Jedi are swallowed up by the encroaching darkness, and her heart leaps into her throat. But Padme reaches for her hand and squeezes, her eyes luminous in the semi-darkness, and gives Ray a warm smile. Fear not, my dear. This is only where one journey ended, and where another one began. From this point forward, you and Ben always find each other. From one lifetime to the next. You'll never be parted again. It's music to Ray's ears. She folds Padme into a tight hug, a choked sob escaping her lips. Thank you so much for everything. She sniffles into her shoulder. Padme pulls back gently with an inscrutable look. Just remember to love each other and never take that love for granted. A frown puckers her delicate brow. I too loved someone very much, long, long ago. It wasn't meant to be, but at least our suffering was not in vain. Because in the end, the choices Ben made broke our family's curse. He reminded us that the dark doesn't always win. Sometimes love can and will conquer all. There are so many more questions she wants to ask, so many things that remain unanswered, but the sky is rapidly growing darker and the edges of the field are beginning to dim and fade. That velvety blackness is already tugging lightly at the back of her mind. Ray knows her remaining time here is short. With a sudden burst of clarity, she realises what an extraordinary gift she's just been given. To learn that she and Ben have been connected since the very beginning. Their souls forged in the same breath by the same cosmic entity, to know they've been on the same path for maybe centuries. That their meeting and falling in love was more than just happenstance. Theirs was a fate written in the stars. They had defied the will of an entire uncaring universe because of one single promise, and that's something she never wants to forget. Evening's now fallen fully over the landscape, and Ray can only make out Padme's silvery outline in the pale wash of moonlight. It's all starting to slip away already, and an icy panic seizes her chest. Padme, wait, will I remember any of this? Her laughter tinkles faintly away, and her voice sounds so far away as though it's travelled from a great distance along a taut silken thread. You always ask me that, Padme says just before winking out of sight. Always? Ray squeezes her eyes shut, chanting frantically as the now familiar sensation wraps around her consciousness. Remember this place, Ray, remember. And once again, the world sinks into that soft, endless night. Thick, oppressive heat is the first thing she's aware of, once she begins climbing out of that ephemeral space between dreams and wakefulness. The short reprieve offered by the thunderstorm is now past, as Ray rubs her eyelids, peeling them open after a sleep of what feels like 1,000,000 years. She's surprised to find traces of wetness on her fingertips. There are tears clinging to her lashes, ones that have already fallen, having dried on her face in tight, salty tracks, her pillows tamped too, fisted in a lumpy ball beneath her cheek. She lifts her head from it slowly, strangely disoriented, though she doesn't understand why she should be. Late afternoon sunlight streams a burnished path across the floor, and the robins outside chirp their happy little song, no doubt thrilled by the bounty of worms that always wriggle out of the ground after a storm, instinctively drawn to the cool and the wet of the rain. Ray knows exactly where she is, and the thought is comforting, though again she can't quite pinpoint why. She's naked in Ben's bed, in Ben's bedroom. While it's still new, it's familiar nonetheless, and so she sits up, stretching her arms over her head to shake off the last vestiges of sleep. She smiles at his still sleeping form, admiring his bare muscled back, his share of the white sheets tangled and twisted around his waist and long legs. After throwing on his black t-shirt, she makes a trip to the bathroom, drinks some bottled water in the kitchen. She returns several minutes later. She finds Ben awake, sitting up and rubbing his eyes from sleep. He seems to be struggling to orient himself in the same way she'd been, so Ray approaches him gently, kneeling on the bed and crawling over to him, intending to greet him with a soft kiss and a smile. When she reaches him, her gaze falls from his face to his chest and lower, landing on his birthmark, and suddenly the entire universe comes to a screeching halt. The birthmark from his wound. The wound she gave him by running him through with his own weapon when she was trying to kill him. The memories flare to life with abandon, fresh in her mind as if it just happened yesterday. She is Ray from nowhere, and he's Ben Solo, the powerful warrior and wayward heir to a legacy of Jedi Masters. And comes back in crisp, frightening detail, the rusted ruins in the sea, his crimson blade, how the hilt vibrated in her hand when she'd struck him down, and the grisly wound it left behind, the ghoulish emperor, the dank cavern underground, eerily lit in desolate shades of cyan, watching men bring her back to life, only for him to die because of it. And then the field, golden and vibrant and beautiful, Padme and Ben again, healed and whole, being offered eternal peace and rest by the Jedi, but turning it down for her, because I made a promise to a girl. She reaches forward, pressing a trembling hand against his birthmark, unable to look him in the eye. I told you I deserved it, Ben rasps, covering her hand with his voice throaty with sleep, but there's a trace of humour in it too. So he remembers as well. Ray isn't sure how to feel about that, or anything right now for that matter. Everything's gone either blurry or numb, and she can't bring herself to look up at his face while she's spiralling. He's making jokes. And it hits her then. The enormity of it all that Ben gave up just for her. In the soft evanescence of her dream, she'd been elated, overjoyed to learn that they'd be reunited. But now, in the stark reality of light of reality, she's faced with what his choice really meant. By choosing to be with her, he'd sacrificed something truly glorious, something extraordinary for himself, irrevocably, forever. It's too much for her to bear. Dropping her hand away, Ray squeezes her eyes shut, ducking her head as a tidal wave of guilt crashes over her, hot, salty tears sliding down her cheeks, and she wishes she could just curl up into a ball and disappear. But Ben won't let her hide from him so easily. "Ray, look at me," he says, gripping her upper arm with one hand and crooking a finger under her chin with the other, lifting her face level with his. He knows her altogether too well, Ben does. It's both a blessing and a curse. He sends another wave of guilt and remorse flooding through her. Why does he have to be so wonderful and kind and understanding? "He was wrong, you know," Ben murmurs, and that grabs her attention. She forgets her wallowing for a moment as his expression turns earnest. "There's no greater gift, nothing I could have ever hoped for, than being given the chance to spend forever with you, knowing I'll always find my way back to you." His ambery gaze is warm as he strokes his knuckles softly against her cheek, brushing away her tears with his lips tilted in the ghost of a smile. "To me, that's heaven." Ray just gapes at him, stunned into silence. What is she possibly supposed to say to that? So instead she makes an inelegant sound, something between a sniffle and a snort, and lunges forward, scrabbling at his shoulders whilst planting a flurry of clumsy, impassioned kisses all over his stupidly handsome face, down along his stubbly jaw, before coming to linger at the corners of his mouth. To think that she, the girl who's always been alone, the orphan girl no one cares about, is loved and wanted by this amazing, incredible man, is something Ray can hardly fathom. To know that Ben would choose her always feels like so much more than she deserves, and yet she knows he speaks the truth. Those dimples she adores so much deepen with his growing smile, so makes sure to leave a trail of kisses there too, burying her fingers into the silky hair at his nape as she pulls himself even closer, bracketing her thighs around his hips as she settles into his lap. His huge hands wrap around her waist and he shifts beneath her, putting just a little distance between them. She frowns, pulling away slightly to find Ben's cheeks are flushed, spreading all the way to the rounded tips of his ears, peeking out from under the black strands. And then Ray glances down, taking the fact that she's only in his t-shirt, and he's still completely naked, save for the sheet below his waist covering what appears to be a rapidly developing situation. Oh, of course. With all these memories so fresh in their minds, it's almost as if they're seeing each other for the first time. Or rather, the first time since that chaste, tender kiss on a cold stone floor in a demolished cavern so many lifetimes ago. Ray knows eventually those memories of those former lives will dim and fade, becoming an intrinsic part of themselves, not unlike how the sea becomes one with the shore, or how every night the sun inevitably sinks into the horizon. But now, right now, they could allow themselves to have this moment, couldn't they? Their other selves, those star-crossed lovers who were denied the chance to experience this, too burdened by the weight of an entire galaxy, honour and duty-bound to uphold the rules of a war they had nothing to do with starting. For all those times they should have been talking instead of fighting, should have been offering more compassion and less contempt, had they only known how quickly it could and would all be taken away. But they were here now, together and so very much alive, and they could have this at least once. Ben's eyes blaze with a need that matches her own, and it's clear he's thinking the same thing. Without any preamble, Ray gasps the hem of his shirt and pulls it up and off, tossing it across the room. She internally preens at the way his gaze heats, pupils swallowing his golden brown irises as he drinks her in, every last inch of skin now bared to him. They reach for each other at the same time, and when their lips meet, it sends an electric current zipping down her spine as if the whole world shrinks, distilling down to them and what's happening in this moment. And suddenly every little sensation becomes increasingly magnified. His hands running up and down her bare back, weaving into her hair, cradling her head, flexing around her waist, the softness of his plush lips pressed against hers, coaxing them open, the warm, wet slide of his tongue, and the humid heat of his breath as he exhales, the low, husky sigh rumbling from his throat, making her body thrum with an aching desire. They take their time, exploring each other, with eager, tumbling kisses over and over, languorous and unhurried. Threading her fingers through his thick hair, Ray arches into him, seeking the heat from his massive body and the press of smooth, firm skin and corded muscle against her smaller, softer curves. He complies with a hint of a smile against her lips as he grips her waist and hoists her gently off the bed, her legs still wound around his hips as he settles her on her back, beneath him in one swift movement, never once breaking their kiss. With each caress, more memories begin to stir from someplace deep in her mind, bright, tender moments in her life, largely marked by loneliness and despair, stolen moments between two fated souls, divided by tragedy and the consequences of their own actions. Hands reaching over warm firelight, across the span of an entire galaxy, the first fragile bud of hope blooming between them, the touch of his bare skin against hers, and later his soft, desperate plea to join him, while that same galaxy crumbled and burned around them, their hearts splitting apart when they both realised that he couldn't leave and she couldn't stay. He breaks from their kiss with a shudder, tears welling up in his eyes. She doesn't know if he's remembering too, or if he just has an uncanny sense for what she's feeling.
I'm sorry, Ray. I'm so sorry.
She cuts him off with her fingers pressed against his lips. Shh. Don't do that. We both should have. Ray kisses him deeply, tasting something bittersweet in his tears, and with each breath gives it back 1,000-fold apologies for the past, promises for the future, his lips moving down her throat, trailing feathery kisses as they brush along her collarbone, whispering her name and something else that sounds a little like sweetheart, but not quite. She almost wants to ask, but does it really matter? Everything she needs to know or understand is right here before her, shimmering, the depths of his eyes warming her skin with his every caress, and when he finally sinks into her, it all makes sense. The realization crystallizes in her mind, clear and sharp. Everything they'd ever done, every choice they'd ever made, good or bad, right or wrong, was always leading them to this. So Ray decides to let it go. All the guilt and regret, once and for all, shedding it like a second stifling skin. Hadn't she told him he was worth everything? And she had meant it. With every last fibre of her being. Ben is here now, and they're together. And that's all that matters. Love flows through her veins, brought to a frothy simmer by the passion stirring between them, and that beautiful oneness in her heart glows brightly once again. A cool, pale wash of moonlight spills across the floor, and the crickets chirp their evening lullaby. Ray lies on her side with her cheek pressed into Ben's shoulders, their fingers laced together, resting on his broad chest. I can hear you thinking over there, she murmurs. It's incredibly noisy. He huffs a small laugh.
Just thinking about you, sweetheart.
What about me? A long silence stretches between them. Just when she thinks he's fallen asleep, he speaks.
Your love saved me, he rumbles, stroking his hand along her back. In all the ways I couldn't save myself. His words pluck at her heartstrings. So wonderful he is, her Ben. She vows right then and there to never take him or what they've been given for granted. She smiles, turning her head to plant a soft kiss on his chest. We saved each other. Lying there now, wrapped in one another's arms, Ray can't help but wonder how could she be so lucky. Her heart lurches as she thinks of Padme, what she'd said about her own lost love. And Ray hopes that perhaps somewhere they were reunited after all, someplace across the stars. And the thought gives her a shred of comfort. After all she's seen, she'd never rule anything out. But in this world without wizards or magic, where dreams so often don't come true, and where it seems like the bad guys always win, maybe for once someone was finally going to get their fairy tale ending. She doesn't know how they've been fortunate enough to have it happen to them, until her gaze drifts over Ben's birthmark, and Ray thinks maybe, for one lifetime at least, they've suffered enough. Ben sighs, tightening his hold over her, and she lifts her head and reaches up, sweeping a lock of dark hair from his brow. Her fingers tracing lightly across his skin, his deep whisky eyes meeting hers, and as she drowns in them, sweetly, eternally, Ray thinks maybe he was right all along. Maybe, just maybe, it's exactly what they deserve after all. Still go and read the story and do kudos and comment and things. Because, yeah, it's just lovely. I am so glad that you enjoyed that one. I really am. Thank you so much for writing it, because I know that I certainly enjoyed it. Yeah, so this will be up on the YouTube in the next day or so. And I'll make sure that link goes out to all the places. Come and join us on Wednesday for Christmas stories. If you do have Christmas stories that you would like to put in, please submit them. And extra props to Avianda for basically being my social media manager, and kicking my ass into doing all the things and making me go and put stuff places. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming and listening to. I don't think any of us could. Fedovan says thank you so much for taking the extra time. Honestly, I don't think any of us could have stopped. we had to get to the end of the story. There's no point to pause in that. I can't imagine reading that as it went. So this, it was. So you started this in September and you finished it in November, which is amazing. But like, can you imagine trying to read that over 2 months and just being like, where's the next chapter? Also, that there are a couple of I feel absolute, like I do follow. Don't get me wrong, I do follow live stories and stories as they're written, and I do really enjoy it. But there was just nowhere to stop. It was too good. So yeah, thank you everybody. Do
do spread the word about MKR. If you enjoyed having your story read, please tell your friends to come and submit. The next Wednesday's theme is just Christmas stories. So yeah, come and get your mates to submit. Come along. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for letting me read your story. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, as you could probably tell. Yeah, it is midnight here, so I saw Dampier say it's half past 3 in the afternoon. It's midnight here. I'm sleepy. So yeah, I will my Green Umbrella has had a number of works read on here. I've also Green Umbrella should be putting out one of the formal recordings if we can get the tech to interact properly, and you'll be able to hear the difference between what I do on the stream and what I do with the recorded works, which have like Foley and intro and outro music and stuff like that. But yes, yes. So yeah, I'm so glad you enjoyed it. Spread the word, get people to submit on the sheet, and we'll see you on Wednesday, everybody. Thank you very